Welcome all. I'm Ted Helms. I'm the Executive Director of the Chamber. Our mission is to promote trade, investment, understanding. I particularly enjoyed this event. Many of you may know I spent 17 years at Petrobras.
The implications for this have just been unbelievably profound, from changing the political discourse in the country, obviously, to the elected officials that are there. Upon this backdrop of bribery, I think that for many of us in the U.S. Has become that are in this particular field have become the focus are the lives of everyday Brazilians and the political fortunes of an entire class of politicians from really every party. That we have heard from federal prosecutors in Brazil for years is that the initial phase of car wash, the focus on Petrobras and focus on some of the government officials, was only the first phase. And we're going to see many, many new phases, and some of those phases would start to focus on where the money has gone. And that's really going to be a theme for what we're talking about today in this presentation. Because what we're seeing now are banks, senior personnel there at multiple banks around the country who are being investigated. There's many, many loose ends and threads that have been pulled that relate to money laundering. Not just related to the Petrobras scheme, but other information that's come through because of leniency agreements, because of some of the detention techniques that have become so controversial. But Odebrecht, of course, is going through a bankruptcy process, and similar to what happened with Arthur Andersen and Enron, there's a real debate now about whether or not that ultimate bankruptcy or potential liquidation of Odebrecht is really in anyone's interest in the long term. So these are all very, very complex, fast-moving issues in Brazil, and Ted and I were talking before the panel about what is the potential exit strategy given all of these complexities, given the fact that these investigations are going into every area, given the fact that the federal prosecutors in Brazil are essentially independent, even from their own attorney general. So if there's no check at some point to what's going to continue, where does this end? Now, maybe for us and for the lawyers and consultants, maybe it doesn't end, and maybe that's a good thing for business, but is that a good thing for Brazil? And what we've seen is a weakening, certainly not a situation where Lava Jato is not broadly popular, I think it is, but certainly a weakening in the public support surrounding Lava Jato as some of these political implications have played out.
Lava Jato, official Lava Jato, they claim that they nationalized over than 2 billion reais. I cannot assure this, but they are nationalizing a lot of money. And they are making a lot of marketing over there. So, I don't know if it's true. But I do know 2.1 billion reais are frozen now. And most of this money relates to Lava Jato in Rio. Lava Jato Rio, they happen to freeze in Luxembourg and Switzerland and other countries and tax havens, right? More than 3,000 offshore accounts. But these 3,000 offshore accounts related to some approximately 5,000 persons under investigation in Rio, only by Lava Jato.
Last year, the number of asset forfeiture cases and money laundering cases in white-collar prosecutions is up 30% year to year, and over the last 5 years, it's up almost 2/3. So this is becoming a very, very important initiative for the Department of Justice. The money laundering statutes, those are criminal offenses, allow the prosecutors to charge people and charge companies. If the defendant gets convicted, they put the individuals in jail and can collect massive criminal fines against the corporate entities. Asset forfeiture, in contrast, is simply a remedy or a penalty. What the asset forfeiture statutes allow is confiscation, the confiscation of valuable assets of a defendant. Used in conjunction with one another, these have become powerful enforcement tools for the United States government. Equally important is to recognize that the asset forfeiture power, the confiscation power, is not limited to criminal cases. We have very robust, in the United States, very robust civil forfeiture provisions in our statutes. And indeed, probably our most celebrated or infamous forfeiture cases are civil forfeiture cases where crimes are not being charged, where there's not a prosecution. On the criminal side, the statutes, our money laundering statutes, are a trap for the unwary. The question is, what do the statutes, what does the money laundering law in the United States criminalize? Now, everyone understands in the US and I think around the globe what money laundering is, right? It's the cleansing of a taint from ill-gotten gains. It's taking dirty money and making it look like it's clean money. And that's certainly prohibited by our money laundering statutes. But our statutes go much further than that and criminalize conduct that would not appear to most people to be money laundering, and indeed, in some instances, would not even appear to be criminal. I'll give you just one example. One of our money laundering statutes is called the spending statute. Here's how it works. Let's say you have a business, you're running a business, and somebody wants to invest $10,000 in your business. Now you know, as the owner of this business looking for funding, you know that the person that's going to invest years earlier had been involved in some shady activities and criminal activity, and you have a good sense that some of the money he wants to invest came from that. You weren't involved in that fraudulent activity. It's been over for years. And when you take the investment in, you do nothing to hide it or disguise it or change anything at all. You take the money in and all the investment documents accurately identify the investor, accurately identify how much he's invested, where the money came from to put into your bank account. All you do is take the money and put it in your company's bank account. You have just committed a money laundering crime in the United States, can be prosecuted and sent to jail.
But as far as the state of compliance, from my perspective, when we talk to compliance officers, compliance department personnel, they're actually really excited about implementing compliance at their companies. I know there's a lot of talk of, well, has anything really changed, or, culture is very difficult. This is just the way business has been done for years. But from what I've seen, partly I think due to the high-profile nature of a lot of the enforcement actions that we've talked about, compliance has become a focus of companies, especially those that are looking to expand globally. They're looking to have ethical business conduct and principles and follow their code of conduct. They need a compliance program in order to make those investments across the globe, in order to retain employees. Employees, especially in Brazil, are looking for companies that conduct business in a compliant manner.
Well, how does a company that doesn't have the resources of a large company control against the risk that Bob was referring to? That it might engage in a transaction with another party that seems totally legitimate, but for some reason the resources came from some illicit activity years and years ago. If I'm a small or medium-sized company, I'd be concerned about how I control that risk.
Yeah, there's a few ways, and it is a real concern, especially, third-party risk. There's a stat out there that I think 90% of enforcement actions deal with third parties. I think it's even higher than that if you really look at the numbers. But it goes back again to reasonableness. So especially for smaller companies that don't necessarily have the resources, you can only go so far with diligence and looking into the background of your third parties, making sure they're reputable. So it's what you do after the fact, and that may come down to monitoring the activity of the third party, how you engage with the third party. It could be annual training. It could be exercising audit rights if you have that in your contract, and trying to ferret out those possible connections. A lot of fraud and corruption cases, it starts with the top management. because internal controls can only take you so far, and compliance program can only take you so far. Management override can't always be prevented. So to combat that, I think, everybody talks about tone at the top of the compliance program. First of all, executives and management need to be vetted up front as much as possible before they join, but there also has to be basically mitigating controls in place where as a single person doesn't have the ability to authorize, say, an entire structured operation, or doesn't have the ability to authorize even a single payment without a second signature. There also has to be constant management training, reporting, escalation, a speak up type culture that I think a lot of companies that are maybe strongly run by one or two people, there's sort of that hierarchical feel within the company where they're deferring to the management team. So just building out those controls as much as possible where that type of activity is taking a second look can help prevent.
It's actually never been a better time to invest in Brazil from a perspective of buying a clean company. The work that's been done over the last 5 years is actually extremely valuable, but you have investors who are not as sophisticated, who are looking around the world at potential investments, who are sometimes backing away from Brazil because of the perception, that is out there in the market because of the massive issues that have been caused by Lava Jato.
But what I don't like to see an end is the enforcement actions. They are enforcing the law. They should keep enforcing the law. I think we have 2,000 federal prosecutions in the country, and we have roughly the same federal judges. So I would love to see no end for the law enforcement, as it should be enforced without the show.
From my perspective, at least, the compliance programs are as strong as they've been. And one thing that has proven that out from when we do these risk assessments with companies, Brazil, I think more than any other country that we perform these in, is embracing the use of technology to support compliance programs. And that is a wide range of effects. They're looking at ways to use data analytics to help uncover improper payments or just do ongoing monitoring efforts. They're using technology platforms for things like due diligence, conflicts of interest, gifts and entertainment. The compliance personnel that we talk to are just really excited about the future of compliance in Brazil, and they really are, at least from our perspective, leading the way in using technology to get there.
Thank you very much.